Hi, I know it's been a really long time, but I've decided to upload a video about my bookshelf and the kind of books that are on it, and I'm just going to use this as an opportunity to talk through some of the books I like and some of the books that I may not be so keen on. So yeah, as I said, I know it's been a really long time and I only really have time to upload in the summer holidays. I've kind of been working all year, so I thought it'd be a nice chance to just talk about some books, nice casual chat. So here's my bookshelf. Okay, so here's just a general overview, and you can see there's actually not that much at all, really. So I need to get a new, larger bookshelf probably this summer because some of my books don't fit and I have another shelf, and there's also a large shelf downstairs, but these are just all the ones that I reference most often. So at the top, how I've organised it, I should probably do an overview. I've organised it basically by time period, so the oldest up here down to the newest at the bottom, and I've kind of organised it by genre within that and then in alphabetical order of the author's name, so it's easier to reference, because I found when doing it alphabetically you'll kind of group books of a similar kind, so aka the Gothic, you would have like Mary Shelley one place and then you've got like Bram Stoker another, and it's just quite difficult when you're, say for example, studying the Gothic. It's not like exactly easy to find everything, so I just changed the way that I did it. So yeah, over here we've basically just got drama. I know that's a bit broad, but it's kind of like Shakespearean around that time, sort of Renaissance as well going into that, and this is done in kind of alphabetical order. I've not got very many, as you can see. Sorry, these little tabs here are just telling me what books I either need to go back to, what books I need to read. There's some pink ones as well, and just, yeah, they're just telling me different things about the books so I don't forget about them, but I need to update it because I've since bought a load of new books that I need to label read me. So yeah, Dr. Faustus, as you can see, this, oh my god. Yeah, studying that one, and I studied The Tempest before and also studying Othello. And then Don Quixote. This one, to be honest, I was going to do a video about whether it's actually worth reading this book, because I read it, and as you can see, it's quite a big book, and it took me, you know, quite a long time. I don't have much time to read in term time. So it tends to be the holidays that I do most of my reading, or maybe sometimes the weekends, depending. But to be honest, I don't think it's really worth reading it, because it started out being quite funny, as you would expect for this kind of book, being kind of, yeah, these are the epics, by the way, as you can see there's not many of them. And yeah, it started out quite funny, and it felt a bit kind of like a comic book in a sort of weird way, that sort of like little stories that kind of go along in one event but can be read separately. So it started a bit like that, but then as it went on it just got a bit boring, and yeah, not much really happened. So to be honest, I didn't really get the fuss about it. I mean, obviously it's a translation, I think from Spanish, but I just wouldn't say that one's worth reading. This one, on the other hand, definitely worth reading. It's probably my favourite text. I say text, I don't mean favourite story, because obviously it's kind of about the fall. If you're not familiar with Paradise Lost, then I encourage you to look it up. But it's not as such an original kind of story idea. It takes a lot of biblical ideas into it, but the actual text, as in the writing style, is probably my favourite. But yeah, not the story. If someone asks me what my favourite book is, I won't be able to answer. But this is my favourite text because you can keep going back to it and there's always loads of new things to discover about it. You never exhaust it, basically. You can spend hours just reading one page. This I have not finished. Oh my gosh. I've basically got halfway through it and then I had to stop to read another book. But yeah, I quite like it, but again, it's sort of a translation, so Milton's kind of the only English epic really that I can think of. Then over here we've got the kind of romantics into Gothic, because this is Frankenstein is both Gothic and romantic, so it's kind of both. We've got Percy Shelley selected prose and poems and prose, sorry, and we've got different essays in there. So this one I use more as a reference text. I haven't actually read the whole way through it. I just use it to go to if I'm like writing an essay or something. This is The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, Coleridge. Oh my gosh, you can see how tightly everything's packed in here because it literally won't come out. Oh my gosh. So I just have to shake my entire bookshelf to try and fit all these in. They're like so tightly squeezed in here. So that's good. The Turn of the Screw. I actually don't remember what happens in that because I read it quite a long time ago, so I've been meaning to read it again. This again is another one I use for reference. Any kind of anthology, I tend not to read the whole thing. I just go to it whenever I need to or if I'm interested in it. But this one's quite useful for the Gothic, I think. And also just anything sort of Victorian. This one I read quite a while ago, and I think my sister's read it as well. But yeah, I don't really remember too much about that either because I read it a long time ago. Dracula, on the other hand, I really like Dracula. At first, it wasn't what I expected because I feel like a lot of people expect like the whole story to kind of be centered around Dracula, and yeah, it is, but it's a slow burner really when you read it, and quite a lot of it doesn't feel like Gothic at all. Like it doesn't have that feeling that you would expect, like Frankenstein. So it's actually quite different to what I thought it would be. You can see it's so worn. Like that's the problem with these editions, is if it gets worn, it's, you know, I mean, look at that, like, oh dear. This here, I think, well, I started to study that one, but then that's quite a long story really. Not the actual book itself. Yeah, so this one, enjoyable again, isn't it? It's just kind of the Gothic. That's how I got into reading more like adult books, because I went from reading things like Lord of the Rings and stuff, like when I was younger, and then the first one I read was Frankenstein, that was kind of in the, I don't like to say adult section, because like, if you're mature enough to read it, it shouldn't just be for adults, but, you know, what people consider to be like not in the kids section. That was the first one that I read, really. Going down here, this is, right, I wish I could fit books on this shelf, but I can't because it's for some reason shorter than all the other shelves. So I can only put my old books on here. This one is Tennyson's poems, and it's actually a Victorian edition, which is really, really nice. So it's actually from, the date, I've forgotten exactly the date, but it says in here somewhere. I think it's like 18 something, like late 1800s, and Tennyson was alive when this was published, so I just really like that. And I believe it's from America as well. And this is Robert Browning as well. This is from the year 1900, so it's over 100 years old. So I just like collecting old books and finding them. It feels really special, like that people in the Victorian era would have like read these and like had these books kind of thing, and they survived through both world wars. These two are more just ones that were lying around and I don't have much interest in, to be perfectly honest. So I have got another old book in a box, but it's so old that I can't actually get it out without it disintegrating. So it's just in a box and I won't bother to get that one out. Down here, right, I have to explain this. So here we have kind of the women in literature section, and then the men in literature section. But down here it says 19th century sensation novel. As you can see, there's like one Wilkie Collins, and that's only because I've run out of space on this shelf and the shell underneath and the shell underneath that. The shelf. Sorry. I've run under, I can't talk. I've run out of space here and here to actually, oh my gosh, I'm trying to sit down. To actually fit these on, the other sensation novels that should actually be there, and I've got them down here, and I'm studying The Moonstone and, where is it, Lady Audley's Secret at the moment, and that just leaves The Woman in White, which I'm reading as a support kind of text at the moment, so I've not actually got those on there, but this is why I need a new bookshelf. So yeah, The Moonstone, I think Charles Dickens said it was wearisome beyond endurance, and I have to say I do kind of agree with him at certain parts, because it's very long and not all of it feels like entirely relevant. I mean, I do love crime novels, but yeah, parts of that were quite long and it did take me a while to read it. And then Lady Audley's Secret, I much prefer this in some respects, but not all because some of it is a bit kind of obvious, and I think it's supposed to be, but yeah, The Moonstone is definitely well crafted. It is just very long. So yes, the women in literature, we've got some Jane Austens here. Pride and Prejudice, this might sound really controversial, but I actually prefer Persuasion to Pride and Prejudice. Like, I found Pride and Prejudice quite overhyped, to be honest. Like, when I actually read it, I wasn't like majorly blown away, and I don't want that to, you know, if you think that Pride and Prejudice is like the best of her novels, then fair enough. But yeah, personally, Persuasion I just preferred to Pride and Prejudice. Could be because I was quite young when I read this, like really quite young, and then when I read Persuasion, like that's more recent, so I could kind of understand it more than when I read that. This one I haven't read yet, but it's another reason I got it, because of the Gothic. It's not really a Gothic novel in the same sense, it's quite hard to explain, but I got that because I thought it would be quite helpful. This one I've not read yet, and I need a new edition because my hand's getting cramped from lifting this up. Because this print is just ridiculously small. Like, there's no way that I'm reading this print. I mean, it's absolutely tiny. And I get headaches quite easily from a lot of things. So I've only got it on here just to remind me that I need to buy another edition of it. Otherwise, if I take it off, I'll forget about it. That's why I have this system of just things on it, because otherwise I forget. Right, I bought Villette after reading Jane Eyre because I love Jane Eyre so much, and I prefer it to Wuthering Heights. Again, this is controversial, and I think it's only because maybe my age, like Wuthering Heights is quite hard for me to relate to, whereas Jane Eyre, you know, it's kind of like about growing up, so maybe that's why I relate to it a bit more. So I bought Villette because I quite enjoyed reading Jane Eyre, so yes, and that goes on to Wuthering Heights. I don't think I really enjoyed it as much as I thought I would. So I think that's one I want to go back to when I'm older, just to see if I can get something different out of it to what I got out of it from reading it a few years ago. So I think that is the only thing, like being younger and reading books that are kind of written for a more mature audience. Sometimes it's quite hard to relate to the topics in the text. But well, yeah, I just have to return to it. But it gives you an interesting perspective reading it at different ages and how your kind of opinions change. This is Middlemarch. I've not had a chance to read it yet, so I can't really comment. That's why this is on it. Read Silas Marner a long time ago. It's a nice story, you know. It's, again, I've not read it in such a long time that I can't really comment on it too much with confidence, but yeah, all I would say is just kind of a nice, like, relatively swift read. Aha. So yeah, Robert Browning is probably my favourite poet, because I do specifically like poetry, as well as just novels, so that's why I've got that. Poetical works of Robert Browning, because I just love Robert Browning poems, and things like, I think Porphyria's Lover is what got me into it. Things like Porphyria's Lover, The Laboratory, and on the AQA A-level literature and language there is a whole collection of Robert Browning poems. I don't actually do that exam board, but it's definitely interesting to like have a look at them all, the ones they've chosen to put on there. And then Charles Dickens. To be honest, I'm not that much of a Dickens fan. Like, I don't think I've read enough of his works. I mean, look, there's 2 books here. I intend to read A Tale of Two Cities. I started Bleak House, but obviously then another book came up to do with what I was actually studying, so I had to kind of drop it. That always happens. I always start my own reading and then it's like I have to read something else. So yeah, I've not really read much Charles Dickens, but I just, yeah, again, I find it quite difficult to relate to. So maybe that's why it doesn't engage me as much. But I definitely enjoyed Great Expectations more than Oliver Twist. Oliver Twist wasn't really my thing. Thomas Hardy, Jude the Obscure. I did enjoy reading this. I mean, it was a lot darker than I thought. I mean, Tessa of D'Urberville's is quite dark as well in some areas. And it's quite difficult to read at parts because, you know, it's very kind of well, tragic, really. So yeah, Tess of the D'Urbervilles was the first Hardy that I read, again, quite a while ago. And then I read Jude the Obscure a lot more recently. I do want to read things like Far From the Madding Crowd and The Woodlanders at some point. That is on my list. But yeah, good reads, enjoyable. I think I prefer Tess of the D'Urbervilles to Jude the Obscure. And then poetry of Thomas Hardy. Got a big old anthology here. Again, this is just one that I would kind of dip in and out of. I have like studied some of the poems of Thomas Hardy in the past. Not my favourite poet, I think, just because sometimes it is very kind of bleak to read. But yeah, I prefer kind of a lot of style and language, really. Not read Vanity Fair either. I was going to read it in lockdown, and then lockdown ended, so I didn't really have time to read it. That's on my list as well. This is a thing with reading books. There's always an endless pile that you just never get through. So this is Victorian poetry. Got some Browning, Christina Rossetti. Sorry, I have these like lame pieces of paper to separate all my books. Christina Rossetti, Hardy, Bronte. To be honest, Charlotte Bronte's poetry I don't find to be as good as her prose. I think Emily Bronte's poetry is better than Charlotte's, but I haven't read a lot of their poetry. I've only read a few, but from what I got from it, I definitely prefer Charlotte's novels to her poems. And Emily, sorry, I don't mean to zoom in on that, I was just pushing that book in. And I prefer Emily's poetry, really. But Wuthering Heights, you know, they say that Emily Bronte is the poet who writes in prose, so each their own. So that's the end of the kind of Victorian section, like 19th century, which is obviously, as you can see, probably the most amount of books that I have from that era. Oh, actually no, we've got My Antonia, but I've kind of grouped that into the American section, really. But obviously that's older than these texts. I like this book. It's nice. It just felt really kind of nostalgic. Like, I never lived there, obviously, but it just, like, childhood, basically. And kind of that growing up process. So I really enjoyed reading this book. I would definitely recommend it. And not read that one yet, so I can't comment. This one, The Great Gatsby, I find it a bit overhyped. I know that sounds a bit kind of strange, and I'm sure there's loads of people who could write like an essay in the comments about this, and you know, I totally get that. But me personally, it didn't kind of blow me away. I sort of just read it and thought, it's clever, you know, I get that, but it's not like something that I would return to over and over again and sort of like talk about all the time. Like, for me personally, it's not my interest. I'm more into like the Gothic and Milton. Like, I could go on about Milton for days. But yeah, it's not as such my interest, really. I read this one because of Paradise Lost. I know it's like not to do with it, but I was reading around kind of ideas about Satan being a sympathetic character in Paradise Lost, and I just thought, well, I'll read this one as well and just see. Bought this one yesterday at like a bookstore. So I actually read a whole group of essays on all her short stories, and I've not actually read those short stories yet because I've studied this, and I read this as well as the kind of support text for that. Definitely good, but when you kind of see, like, say, TV adaptations, especially if this one in particular, the book itself is very different. It's not like kind of really like horrific or anything. It's more subtle than that. It's not kind of like cheesy like horror. It's more, I would say, kind of psychological than that, and this one is sort of the same. So they're definitely very interesting books to kind of talk about and read criticism on, I would say. Especially kind of the context of her life is very interesting. This one, oh my gosh, I was not expecting to read this book at all. But yeah, it's kind of just, I've got a lot of American books I haven't actually read because my dad's more interested in the kind of American literature, so he's read quite a lot of it, but I've sort of received some of those books on my shelf and decided that I would read them. So I thought I'd read this one again because reminded me, I read the blurb and it reminded me of Paradise Lost. So everything in my head is linked to Paradise Lost. So I thought I'd read that, and actually it kind of was quite similar to Paradise Lost, so you heard it here. And then this one is one I definitely need to read. I haven't actually read Of Mice and Men, although it's kind of done in school. I wasn't there for that, so I didn't read The Grapes of Wrath, not The Grapes of Wrath, Of Mice and Men. Sophie's Choice was another one that I was supposed to read, because I was recommended to read it by it was either my religion or my philosophy teacher, I'm not sure. And still haven't read it, but I need to read that one, and if I get onto studying philosophy at any point, then I will definitely read this one as part of that. This one I've read, and a lot of schools study this one. Yeah, it's good. It's not like something that I would go for. Oh, there's a lump of blue tack. It's not really something I would go for as such. Again, I'm more kind of into the kind of pre-1900 text than the post, but hey, it's good to read things that are out of your comfort zone, as is pretty much most of this section here, and down here as well, and I'll get on to that. So out of my comfort zone. So yeah, this one was good, and I've studied this one as well, and yeah, I didn't enjoy the book, but it's actually quite facilitating to write kind of essays on. I mean, I found it quite annoying, the characters, but there's definitely a lot of craft in there in terms of it being either a parody or an allegory, however you want to read it. Strangely comparable to The Tempest up there, I find. But here, Brighton Rock, I read this, and I mean, it's another one that I've heard a lot about, and I feel like it started off kind of quite well, but I'm not sure what it was. Maybe it's just because it's kind of not really my thing, but it wasn't what I expected it to be, and it wasn't kind of something that I thought, oh wow, that was amazing kind of thing. It didn't like touch me personally, as it would other people, and that's the thing about books, like some people connect with other texts more than others, and this one I didn't really connect with it so much. Brave New World. Oh yes, we're getting into the British more modern texts now, modern classics. So Brave New World, I read that as part of a kind of dystopia sitting, which I think I mentioned in a previous video. I just don't like dystopias, I find them quite miserable, so I tend not to really read them, and I find the language tends to be, this is a bit of a generalisation, tends to be more simple in dystopias because it's kind of conveying more of a political message as opposed to being about the kind of words. It's about using the words as an expression of that more so. And I know that's the case with a lot of text, but it just feels more like that for dystopia for me personally. But yeah, I read this one and 1984 and this one here, which was actually some of the influence and inspiration for 1984. Oh my gosh, like, it's so packed and I can't even get it out. Very strange. There was definitely a lot of things that I would suggest if you're studying 1984, read this, because it was part of the inspiration. I don't know how to say this name, so I'm not going to attempt because I'll probably do it very badly. And also Brave New World, they're kind of like the staple dystopias really that you sort of have to read if you're studying them. I love Daphne du Maurier. I always kind of read one around the Christmas holidays or sort of the February half term because it usually takes me like a day to read. I really liked, well, Rebecca was quite, I mean it's quite long, but I enjoy all of them pretty much equally. And there are definitely a lot of them treated, and I just really like these editions. I mean, I know they say don't judge a book by its cover, but you know, you can't lie that these ones have really nice covers. If I can actually get it out, let's show you the Rebecca one. Is it pretty shiny? Yeah, 1984 was good. I did a video about that like a year ago. I didn't go into too much detail. It was more of a casual conversation than like an essay, a video essay. Not read this one either. That's just if I ever get the time. Virginia Woolf. I started reading this and I need to finish it because I stopped reading it And I'll explain now, because the whole thing is kind of set in just one day. Like, it's like a stream of consciousness, so it doesn't say that they are kind of shifting thoughts, they just move around. And it was just giving me loads of headaches trying to read it, because it was just so kind of dense. So I've decided that when I next go back to this, it's something that I'll have to make notes in the margin as I'm reading it. And that's what I've learnt to do as I'm reading things, just make notes in the margin, even if you're not studying it, because it may come up in the future, and then it just helps to have kind of other ideas there rather than trying to remember things you thought while you were reading it. So it is a bit annoying, especially if you're the kind of person that reads before you go to sleep, because, you know, trying to write notes while lying down is not fun. So that is a point. If anyone's watching this, I would like to know kind of how or where you read, because sometimes sitting in an armchair I get like dead arms from holding up the book. And I just wondered, like, where's your favourite place to read, and kind of how do you read, if that makes sense. We talked about that. This is one, I've not read the whole thing, but it's a group of essays by critic A.C. Bradley on Shakespeare and tragedy, which is very useful when you're studying any of them. So it has things like Hamlet, Macbeth, King Lear, Othello, I think has Antony and Cleopatra in there as well, and poetics. I personally find this was very boring to read. I mean, it's probably got to be the most like bland and boring thing I've ever read. And I think it's really because it's just talking about the foundations for like tragedy or drama, and I just found it was just so boring, really. I'm not going to sugarcoat it and try and pretend that I found some kind of interest out of it and be like, oh yeah, well there was this no, it was boring. But one thing I can say about it is, as much as it did bore me to read, it was very useful for essays. So this is kind of what I use. I think I've got this under like critics or something. Very useful for writing essays, to reference these two texts, because they're kind of like the foundations for like tragedy if you're studying that. Documentary style. I did not realise that this was actually a true story. I thought it was like something kind of dramatised, but no, it's a true story. But I don't particularly like the way that this has been done, and I mean, I respect that they've done a lot of research. Kate Summerscale has done a lot of research for this, but it was like referencing, so instead of, say, writing something fictional and then referencing something true as a kind of support, it was writing something factual but then referencing things like the Moonstone along the way, as if the factual event was like influenced by the Moonstone. So it was just very strangely put together, and it was, I don't know, I just appreciate the amount of research that's gone into it, and I found it very interesting. But it wasn't kind of like a crime novel like I thought it was. It was more like documentary writing, but with a slight novel. It was kind of like trying to be both in a way. But oh no, my battery is going to die. That one I haven't read yet, need to read it. This one is a bunch of short stories inspired by Jane Eyre. This one, The Murder Room, I could talk about this for a while because I didn't enjoy it a lot, and my camera's going to die, so I should probably turn this off now. So yeah, Murder on the Orient Express down there, Poems of the Decade, some modern poetry. And yeah, The Woman in White, I can't really comment on it because I've kind of been reading it. So yes, I'm going to have to switch this off now. My camera is flashing at me. So I hope you enjoyed me talking through my bookshelf, and please share any of your opinions on what I've said, differing opinions. You know, it's interesting to hear what other people have to say. So yeah, thank you very much for watching this, and I may upload another video soon, I'm not really sure, but in the meantime, have fun and keep reading. Hi, just a note on what I've kind of just been over with my bookshelf, talking about that. Sorry, I'm just on my computer camera, so that's why the quality is so bad, as my camera failed. But yeah, what I thought I would just say is that I didn't go into a heap of detail about any of the books that I was talking about. Like, I could obviously go into a lot more detail, talking my way through them. But this was more just kind of a casual overview about what's on my bookshelf, and I also didn't show all of my books because I have a shelf up there that has mostly Agatha Christie's on. Like, I have a lot of Agatha Christie's, like, but I kind of would have just gone
there's the Agatha Christie books. So I didn't really show them, and I didn't want to go into an in-depth chat about it. And I've also got some Douglas Adams and a little thing for Paradise Lost up there as well. So I have got and I have got some essays on the Tempest from like an anthology as well. So I have got a few things up there, and also I've got some French novels actually on my desk, but I didn't go through it because it's not like my main bookshelf. But I just wanted to mention that I have got a few other things that I could have discussed. So other questions, just like ask me anything about any of the things on my bookshelf that you were interested in or had an idea about, and let me know, as I said, like the kind of things you read or where you read or how you do it, and yeah, any recent reads. But yeah, as I said, I'm now just gonna say thanks for watching again. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you around soon. Bye.